This is an overview video to deliver Module 3.4 on survey setup in Kobo Collect. So hopefully you know what Kobo Collect is, and hopefully so does the participants in the room. We assume that they are familiar with Module 3.1 on collecting data in Kobo Collect. If you have anybody who's not, it might be worth reviewing a few of the slides from Module 3.1 and making sure that people know how to get into Kobo Collect on a mobile device and understand the basic premises of it. Kobo Collect, of course, is a mobile or web app that's used to collect many different types of data, including spatial data and media files, and it's free and available for offline use on mobile devices. People attending this module will be interested in what the back end looks like, what the submitted responses look like as they get compiled online, how they can access spreadsheets and the graphs and tables and maps and media files that are submitted by data collectors. So this whole module assumes that there are a few computers in the room that can be used for programming forms in Kobo Collect, but also accessing the data that are submitted via the mobile app. A review of when we use Kobo Collect versus other data collection tools such as Google Forms. Kobo Collect really has far more capacity in terms of the types of survey questions that can be asked. It's collecting spatial data, media files. Generally, it's used for longer surveys, like more than 20 questions, and generally used for a lot of quantitative surveys, though given that it does support media files, it could also be used for qualitative data collection. The main selling point of Google Forms is that it's really easy to set up a survey, but there's just other limitations in terms of how we can use it offline. Some other comparisons: Google Forms is actually not an offline data collection app. You have to use another app that enables a Google Form offline. And so this type of app, Formbox, is the one that we have presented in other parts of the Data for Human Rights curriculum. It really limits the questions from Google Forms that can be displayed. So it really is only used for very simple forms. And of course, the data collected in Kobo Collect are quantitative, but also qualitative and spatial. This is a very detailed overview of the types of survey questions that can be collected in Kobo Collect versus Google Forms. And in the middle of these two circles, you see the type of data that are common in both platforms. At the end of this slide deck, each of these types of questions is detailed one by one with what it looks like to program it on the computer, what it looks like on a mobile device, and some guidance about when you would use certain types of questions. For this slide, I want you to walk through a few of the common types of questions that people will see in Kobo Collect. I've got them all listed here, and you'll go through with the team, with folks in the room, and talk through what the question looks like, how it gets answered, how it's formatted on a mobile device, and just get them used to some of the language that is used in Kobo Collect to describe the different types of survey questions. This slide has a series of situations in which you're trying to collect data, and you're going to ask participants to decide whether or not Kobo Collect or Google Forms is more appropriate. So in the first example, we have service mapping, where we map and photograph the locations of public water points, toilets, showers, etc. And this, of course, would require Kobo Collect because we're collecting GPS points and photos, and that's just not possible in Google Forms. The second example is a remote repeated survey where there's follow-up of the same households on a weekly basis by phone, and there's only a few questions in this survey. This is an example where Google Forms would actually be a really sensible option because there's no spatial data, no media files, and you could even assume that data collectors are sitting in an office somewhere making these phone calls, and they might even be connected to Wi-Fi, so they wouldn't even need to use this application called Formbox. They can actually just use Google Forms directly online, making their lives a lot easier. So go through the rest of these examples and understand when Kobo Collect is used in the field. So the task for today, the main thing that you'll be doing in this lecture is recreating some questions from the Data for Human Rights training form. This is a good time also to just review different types of questions. There's a lot of different options in Kobo Collect, and again, getting people familiar with the language and the concepts of different question types is really helpful here. So before you show this, the answers, just have people see if they can remember what different question types they're looking at, and then you can show the answers to see if they've got them correct. The first activity is a rather big one. We're getting people into teams of at least 2, though you can have larger teams if you have few computers. And we're going to ask these teams to set up a Kobo Collect survey on the computer in Kobo Toolbox, which is the kind of umbrella that includes Kobo Collect and other tools. First of all, you're going to show this video. It's about 20 minutes long, and it shows the entire process from beginning to end. You're going to make sure that at least one person in each team is creating a Kobo Collect account, a Kobo Toolbox account. And then once they're logged in using an email, then they'll actually follow all of these steps to program the team ID, GPS point location, etc. It's important when teams are making these forms that they name the form after their team name. The reason that you want to have team name is that they will each share their form back with the Data for Human Rights user account. That just makes it easy for all of the forms to be in one place, and so different teams can test out the forms of other teams. So once all of the teams have programmed in these 5 questions, you're going to move on to activity 2, which is to test the questions from another team. Like I said, everybody's going to share their form with the Data for Human Rights user, and that will make it centrally located, and that account is actually easily accessible by this QR code. So if you remember from module 3.1, you can actually link to a user account using a QR code. And so there's just 2 steps. You click in the upper right corner on the icon. It brings up this projects window, and then you add a project and then scan the QR code. And that should bring you to a place where all of the forms that I've put together for this training, but also all of the other team forms show up. And so then you can assign team 1 to review the survey from team 2 and team 2 to review the survey from team 3, etc. And what you want them to do is test the forms and see if they can find problems with the forms. Can they leave any questions blank? They shouldn't be able to. Can they enter text when they should be entering a number? Things like this. Are there any response categories missing? And when they're done with this activity, just reiterate that this is a really important step in terms of any survey deployment, is you really need to test your survey before you send it out to the field teams. You'll want to do that internally. So if you created a form, you want to be able to actually test it on a mobile device. Things will become obvious to you when you see it on a mobile device. But you should also have other people test it in your team, or even doing some test surveys before you actually deploy the full survey. In activity 3, we're going to monitor the data that were submitted by another team using our form. So now we're going to go back to computers. We're going to go back into Kobo Collect or Kobo Toolbox, and we're going to navigate to this Data tab. And in the Data tab, you'll remember from our video that we've got tables and reports as well as galleries and maps. So you want people to really focus on the table view and the reports view, and then ask them a few questions about how they might use the tables and reports to monitor data quality during the data collection activity, or even sharing results after data collection in terms of graphs and tables and other things that can go into a report. This is most likely going to take you a full day of training, but it's really powerful. We try to cover most of the key features in the 20-minute demonstration video back here on activity 1. So be sure that you share this link with the team after the course, after the training. It'll be helpful to them as they work through their first survey. So that's the end of the lecture part of the training, but as I mentioned before, there's a bunch of slides at the end that give examples of each of the question types that you can use in Kobo Collect. And you'll probably want to spend some time before the training familiarizing yourself with these in case questions come up and you can guide participants. All right, good luck with their training. Take care.